Okay, I want to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahushai, Ba'ashim, Rakah, Kwadash. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who teacheth the Bible in 100% truth, and Shalom to the hopeful elect of the 12 tribes of Israel, especially the 144,000 who consist of the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans in the land of the Americas, as well as the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners living amongst the other nations. Shalom to you. Okay, today I'm just responding to pretty much, we're just coming off the back of Apostle Tahar's video. Christians don't understand the New Testament at all. This is from yesterday, and in this particular video, he highlights vocab alone, who's then highlighting WFI, who are somehow getting taken apart by a Christian, somebody of, if you like, the religion of Christianity. And there's a lot of things obviously that's gone on in this particular interaction, but what I'm looking at today is the statement from Apostle Paul, Acts 26:29, and it says, and Paul said, I would to the Most High that not only thou, but also all that hear me this day, were both almost and altogether such as I am, except these bonds. And the if you like, the Christian, obviously Christian means believer, so the true Christians are actually the ones that believe in Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahushai. So we are the actual true Christians, and the fact that we're believers, that's why we have the truth, we give it that understanding through the Holy Spirit, so on and so forth. So it's a two-way interaction, if you like. But but this particular guy, I think, like I say, I believe he represents the religion of Christianity. He was using this particular verse to try to say that Apostle Paul took this word to the Gentiles, but the Gentiles meaning the other nations. Obviously, that's not true according to the scriptures. Gentile is pretty much an Israelite. You have Jews, Gentiles, Israelites. Jews, Gentiles, and Greeks. So obviously, that at that time, those three terms were down to what Apostle Paul was dealing with. He was dealing with Jews who are Israelites, born as Israelites, know that they're Israelites. And then you have obviously Israelites living amongst other nations. Some of them knew that they were Israelites, still maybe living according to the customs of the other nation, or even their own customs. And then you'd have like, for example, Greeks, Hellenized. So you'd have Israelites that are, if it's the way I kind of refer to it as being westernized. So it's like you come across an Israelite who's living in a Western nation. He's got the Western mindset, Western philosophies. He follows all these Western customs and traditions. He's westernized, and it's the same thing with Hellenized. So Apostle Paul was obviously, we know how it goes. These Christians, these people of the religion of Christianity, they pretty much take that, twist the meaning, and apply it to all the other nations of the world. They say, all nations can be believers in the truth, and Yahushai, Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai, or whatever name that they try to apply it to. But obviously that's not true. And now he used this particular example. Apostle Paul is speaking to King Agrippa, who would be an Edomite, and he's also talking to Festus. And in this particular moment, Apostle Paul has declared that I would to the Most High that not only thou, but also all that hear me this day, were both almost altogether such as I am, except these bonds. And so people jump up and they say, oh, well, this is Apostle Paul taking it to the Gentiles, taking it to the other nations. If he's saying that Agrippa, can be a believer, then he's inviting him in. And so this is where, they start to apply, they add, you're not supposed to add or take away from the scriptures. And, what they're doing is adding. Now, when Vocab Malone spoke on this, this particular precept, he spoke of the word wish. We've got the word wish, which is obviously not in there, but, obviously he's taken that word to describe that situation. It says feel or express a strong desire or hope or for something that cannot or probably will not happen. Number 2, you've got want to do something. As a noun, that's a verb, you can use it as a noun, a desire, or hope for something to happen. So a wish is basically a desire. You've got the word wish again here. The word appears both as substantive and as a verb in the Old Testament, having a variety of meanings. The substantive peh means mouth and also speech. In this form it occurs in Job 33:6, margin, behold, I am according to thy wish in the Most High stead. This Elihu also here refers to Job's expressed desire for an umpire, 9:33, and one who would maintain his right with the Most High, 16:21. And it goes on to say, for example, the verb hafetz, willing, or desirous. That's in Psalms. In Job 31:30, you've got sha'al, to ask, petition, supplicate, sha'al. And another variation of the meaning is found in Psalm 73:7, where masketh, to imagine, is translated wish. They have more than heart could wish. You got ukumau, to solicit, to implore, Romans 9:3. So trying to jam the word wish in there is not possible. Whether you go to the English or to the word, to the Hebrew. So that's added onto the scriptures. But it sounds like it, it says here, Paul said, I would to the Most High that not only thou, but also all that hear me this day were both almost and altogether such as I am, except these bonds. Now, to understand this, you've got to go into the context of the chapter, and maybe even to the previous chapter. And then you kind of get a good understanding of it, which I'll go into in a minute. But you get a lot of people who, for example, like Sakari or certain Israelites, whoever, even people of the faith of Christianity, a lot of people have an issue with the writings of Apostle Paul. I've been on comment boards. You go on these like Christianity videos, and then you read through what people are saying, general things, and I've come across people making comments like, oh yeah, Apostle Paul, never liked him anyway. And you scratch your head, you sit there thinking to yourself, but you never met the man, but you're telling me, yeah, I never liked him anyway. So he gets that, he's got that effect on a lot of people. And what it is, obviously, it's about understanding his writings. Even Apostle Peter said that basically Apostle Paul is hard to understand. He goes deep, or it's not necessarily about going deep. It's knowing how to address the audience that you're talking to, because when you address different audiences, you have to address them in different ways. There are certain customs that you would do in the West in this day and age, and if you go to the Far East and you do those customs over there, they seem offensive to the people living over there because they're of a different custom. So for example, in the West, you'll put your feet up on the table, and I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe, for example, in the East, that's a sign of disrespect to someone to put your feet up on the table and show the bottom of your feet to the other person. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but you kind of get the understanding of what I'm talking about. So just like, you go to certain areas, it's custom for, you go to London on a Friday night, it's custom for the women to wear mini skirts and practically no clothes when they're on their way out to the nightclub. In some places, there isn't that type of custom. The custom is for women to keep themselves covered up. It depends where you go. So you've got to kind of take into account Paul's doing that. He's talking to different audiences, so he has to approach the situation in different ways. You had the issue between the circumcision, about the circumcision, of new believers, ones that are coming in, and after having counsel with Apostle Peter, then Apostle Peter came to the decision that if they're new in the faith, they don't have to have the circumcision. So Paul's dealing with different groups of people with different ideas, different beliefs because of how they've grown up. And so through that, he's tackling many different things all at once. Whereas if you're just preaching to the Jews, then you're only preaching to one group of people, and your speech, you're welcome to being a Hebrew Israelite speech. It can pretty much the same format every time because you're dealing with the same type of person with the same type of background. It's a little bit like a football manager. He's got different players in his squad, and they all come from different backgrounds. They all got the athletic ability, but then they all come from different places, different environments that they've brought them here. And then his job is then to understand the difference between them, work out certain positives. Certain people need an arm around the shoulder, certain people don't. They need a kick up the butt to get them going. And then being if you like, in charge of many different groups of people, personalities from different backgrounds, you have to learn to adapt. That's part of the reason why Apostle Paul was chosen in the first place by Yahushua at that particular time. So, like I said, a lot of people, then they have a problem with Apostle Paul, and what it is, they read through the words, and some things are left open-ended, and this is what the problem that they have. People, especially when people don't have the Spirit on them, and they're just trying to guide themselves mechanically through the scriptures. You've got this WFI, this Naquam. He mechanically works his way through the scriptures. He memorizes them, he writes them down, he knows things, but the Spirit's not there, and you can tell because when certain things happen, he can't spot certain things. He could have presented the argument that I'm presenting today when he was presented with the fact that Apostle Paul invited Agrippa into the world of Hebrew Israelites, if you like, being a believer. But despite the fact that he's studied and mechanically gone through the scriptures, the vision within the mind is not there to allow him to see the scenario, see the scene, see how it plays out, and see how men behave. Because you have to understand how people behave when you read the scriptures to understand the things that are happening and go, okay, that makes sense. This is what he was doing at that point, because when you're like that, you get to that situation, or so on and so forth. So, like I say, these people that don't have the Spirit on them, but they're trying to work through the situation mechanically, they get to these points where Paul leaves statements open-ended. And so it frustrates them because they don't know where to take it in a debate. This is what they want to do, because then now the Spirit's not working on them, but they're going to work through the scriptures mechanically, and they're going to learn them so that they can go and debate. And they don't like to use some of these writings of Apostle Paul because the statements are open-ended. Some are very definitive, so they'll say yep, yep, yep. And then some are open-ended, they'll say, yeah, but Paul, Apostle Paul, we've got a question mark over him. So this is one of them. It says, and Paul said, I would to the Most High that not only thou, but also all that hear me this day were both almost and altogether such as I am, except these bonds. So they say, oh, Paul wants Agrippa to be like him, and accept apart from the chains that he was in. Now, what does that really mean? When you actually ask yourself, what does that really mean? See, what Apostle Paul has done here is he's left an open-ended statement. I wish, or if you like the word wish, or I desire, or I would pray to the Most High that you're the same as me, except these bonds. When you go through the words there, the word in the Greek, there's no special word there to define what he wants you to be like. He wanted Agrippa to be like. So then now I could sit here and say, well, what does that mean? If Paul was 6'6", but in chains, maybe he's saying to Agrippa, I wish you were like me, except for the chains. I wish you were 6'6", but except for having the chains on you. So when it says I desire, for example, for you to be as I am, except these bonds. What does that actually really mean? And so this is an open-ended statement. If you're going to try and debate and hit point for point, then this becomes difficult for you to use. And this is why certain people say, well, Apostle Paul, we're not too sure about him. Now, when you go to 2 Corinthians 12 and 16, it says, but be it so, I did not burden you. Nevertheless, being crafty, I caught you with guile. And so this is what Apostle Paul had to do. The reason why he had to have the guile, the reason why he was chosen in the first place to do that particular job is because he had the guile. He understood different philosophies, different customs of different groups of people, and Yahushua knew when he went out there and I gave him this gospel, he's going to be able to apply it to the things he already knows about society in general, and he's going to be able to apply the word correctly at the right moments, or sometimes there's not the time to apply it. So you have to kind of work that out, and that is guile. You can say guile's a bad thing or it's a good thing. Well, guile's really just a technique that you can use. You can use it for bad or you can use it for good. You have certain athletes that go on a pitch. For example, you watch football, certain athletes are there because they've trained hard in the gym. They've got big shoulders, big chest, big arms, and they're getting up and down the pitch like a steam train. But then you have some players that are on the pitch because they have guile. They don't have particular strength. They haven't got a great upper body strength. You look at them, you think, oh, how did you make it into the team? Because he's crafty. He's got guile. He knows how to, maneuver in and out in between players. So guile is, you might say, well, people do wicked things. They use guile. Well, sometimes people use guile to help you. A coach will use his guile to guide you, and to improve you as a player or improve you as whatever. A teacher would do that same thing if he was switched on. So Paul uses the guile, and apart from the situation that you've got here, he's using guile with Agrippa, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But he's also used the guile in the writings to leave open-ended statements. And the reason why he did that is because obviously he took the word to the Gentiles. He was given the word by Yahushua, and then from there he had to do what he did. The fact that Apostle Paul did what he did, we're now 2,000 years later. So many people are trying to take his words and twist it and use it for their own thing. People are saying, "Oh, he took it to the Gentiles. He changed the face of the world. He took it to the other nations." Then you've got us saying, "No, no, no, no. That's not what really happened. Look up the Greek. Look up the words." And this is all part of the plan of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. This is not Paul's plan. Paul didn't say, "I'll write open-ended statements so that in 2,000 years' time, these people can bug out about it, and everybody will be talking about me. Like everybody hates Chris." But the Spirit was on him to leave open-ended statements, and he used the guile to do it. In this situation, he used the guile against Agrippa, to work around Agrippa, or But there's another piece of guile in that 2,000 years later. You've now got all these people confused, saying, "Oh well, you know, because of what Apostle Paul said, I can be a Hebrew Israelite, or I can be a believer in Yahushua, or they like to use the name Jesus or whatever." Um, so you have stumbling blocks. You look in the truth, through the Bible. Sorry, you look through the scriptures. You understand that there are stumbling blocks. Stumbling blocks are out here today. It's not very hard to understand. You look at all these different camps; they've all got a slightly different twist on the way that they present the truth. You then even got the religion of Christianity trying to drag you away from this truth, but still keep it based around the Bible, if you like, as much as they don't really break down the Bible properly. So stumbling block is quite known. They're around today, so they had to be set up. And one of the stumbling blocks is the word Gentile, is the fact that other nations believe that they can be part of this belief system. You see, you look around today and you look at all the, look at this blue letter, all the Bible commentaries, all the versions of the Bible that are out there. We tell you that the Bible's written in code, because if it was written in black and white English, then they would have banned it a long time ago. So that's one aspect of it. But then obviously, the stumbling blocks had to be laid in there for the people to try to use it for their own purpose today. And so this is all it is. He gets him to leave. The Spirit gets Apostle Paul to leave an open-ended statement, and here you got people, besides themselves over what he said, what he did say, or what he didn't say, arguing over it, debating, and really it's because it's an open-ended statement that just helps to create the stumbling block, and to to what it is today. You look around, you've got these stumbling blocks. They are what they are. They've grown. They've developed. You've got these. Basically, how can I say it? This world has just got these major lies going on all over the place. These people are saying that they got the word of God. The people over there saying they got the word of God. The people over there saying it. And this is what the Most High wanted. He wanted to create an end of days confusion. It's Babylon. So he wanted the Bible to be out here. He wanted these Edomites to think it applied to them. Maybe not at the top echelon. The banking elites. They know that they're not the Israelites of the scriptures, but the common average Edomite that's working in the library, that's taking on the career in philosophy and Bible studies. They believe the scriptures are for them, and so for us to sit here today and have this and be able to read it and go through the commentaries and understand it and be able to break it down, they had to believe what they had to believe in. And they had to believe that the scriptures applied to them to put all this work in. If Paul hadn't left these open-ended statements for people to just, go, okay, that's definitely not what it meant. It definitely meant this. It definitely meant that. Then these people would know. If just like the prophecies, if it was written in black and white English, people would work it out. Do you really think these Edomites and all these people that have done this over the last how many years would have put all these versions of the Bible together? Do you think they would have put the blue letter together for us? They wouldn't have put it together for us. Oh, we'll put it together so that when they wake up in 2,000 years, they can have all this information ready for themselves. No, they put the information together because they believed it belonged to them. And they believe it belonged to them mainly because of a lot of the things that Apostle Paul said. And Apostle Paul, by guile, left open-ended statements for you to do that. And so here we are today. Romans 11, I'll start at 5, says, even so then, at this present time, there is a remnant according to the election of grace. It says, and if by grace, then it is no longer of works. Otherwise, grace is no longer grace. It says, but if it is out of works, it is no longer grace. Otherwise, work is no longer work. It says, what then? Israel has not obtained what it seeks. It says, but the elect have obtained it. That's what we keep telling you. Not all the children of Israel will be delivered or wake up to this truth in this time. So, going on a worldwide rampage to wake up every Israelite in every corner of the earth is never going to happen. It's not going to work. Only an elect, a remnant. And the rest were blinded. Verse 8 says, just as it was written, the Most High has given them a spirit of stupor, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear, to this very day. It says, and David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a recompense to them. It says, let their eyes be darkened so that they do not see, and bow down their back always. So Apostle Paul knew that stumbling blocks exist. They existed back then and they had to exist now. And Yahushua knew that in 2,000 years time, he's going to have a situation, they put this together, the Most High put this together, a situation where we're living in Babylon, everything's confusing, all these different religions, and everybody's going, Paul, Paul, Paul. Paul took it to the Gentiles. So that's why the Spirit got Paul to leave the open-ended statements, use that guile, and here it is, that guile has set up these Edomites believing that they are the people of the Scriptures, and now they put together the blue letter for us. So Apostle Paul knew that there was stumbling blocks. He created a stumbling block. What Apostle Paul also knew was about the word predestined. You look up the word predestined in the Bible, and lo and behold, as you can see, four precepts here, 4 verses. They're all from Apostle Paul. Romans 8:29 says, "For whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren." Romans 8:30, "Moreover, whom he predestined, these he also called. Whom he called, these he also justified. And whom he justified, these he also glorified." Ephesians 1:5, "Having predestined us to adoption as sons by Yahushua, the anointed, to himself, according to the good pleasure of his will." And finally, Ephesians 1:11, it says, "In him also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will." Pretty much the Most High. So Paul understood what predestination was. And when you go back to Agrippa, maybe he didn't know. You could say, well, you had, for example, the Herod dynasty. They mixed. So you could have had what they call light skins, running around. You don't know. Agrippa could have been a light skin. We tell you today, an Israelite can look like any of the nations. So you could look at an Israelite and say, well, he looks Chinese, he looks East Indian, he looks, Edomite, but they could actually be an Israelite. So we don't know that. But Apostle Paul definitely knew about predestination. So to say Apostle Paul was wishing, oh, I wish you could be like me. Well, if Agrippa was an Edomite and he knew that he was an Edomite, he definitely wouldn't want to. Definitely couldn't. There's no point wishing. What are you wishing for? So I doubt he'd, wish, as they say. So then like I say, so if Apostle Paul knew about predestination, like Apostle Paul understood predestination, but doesn't mean he knew who was predestinated or not. So he has to go out there. He has to preach the word, do his job, and obviously, as it tells you, Apostle Paul plant the seed, Apollos was watered, and then the Most High give the increase. So you just, that's all you can do is preach this word. I don't know who's listening now. I don't know who's the elect. You don't even know if yourself is the elect. So you preach this word, you just do it, you put it out there, you put the vibration out there. If my work is really of the Most High, then something will come back to me, and it will work around within a synergy. So Apostle Paul knew, he knew predestination. I mean, like I said, he says, "Oh, I wish you were like me." That could mean anything. He's it could mean anything. "Oh, I wish you were like me." But in what sense? In what sense? I'm many different things. I'm good at this. I'm not so good at that. I'm like this. I'm not so like that. So what does he actually mean? So then you have to go into the context of the the you go into the context of the chapter. You got to look at what Apostle Paul's doing, who he's speaking to, and what's at stake. Now, what it is for me personally, I read through it, and it makes sense. A lot of things make sense in the back of my mind. You like, for example, like this is what I was trying to explain. You got this WFI, this Naquam character, and then he's gone out, he's learnt scriptures. He knows them well. But is the Spirit really there working with him? See, for me, I'll look at this and I'll read this and I'll say, well, I believe the Spirit's working on me. And then when I read it, I understand something. Now, when I understand that something is not mechanical, it's in the Spirit. I understand something in the back of my mind, but I need to turn it into something mechanical to explain to you, whether I turn it into words, whether I write it down, whether I find something online. So I can look at this and I know what I'm looking for just by reading it. It makes sense. Scenario, you got to picture yourself in the scenario. Think how you would operate, and then you could take it from there. But you see, if that Naquam doesn't have the Spirit working on him, it's not going to make sense. And he can read through it, and he can memorize every verse and chapter. And then when he gets to this open-ended statement of Paul, he's stuck. Now, he's not one of them ones that wants to say, "Oh, Apostle Paul, we're not sure about him," but some do. And that's because, you're really stuck. Um, and so looking at this, I know I want to extrapolate something, and I could have sat here and I could have gone through it in my own words. And it's a bit much because obviously, like, I got to sit there and remember that, and did I say that, and am I pointing at this, and it's trying to get the words out. So I started to look around at certain things to, I knew what I was looking for basically. History on Agrippa's knowledge of cultures as mentioned by Apostle Paul. So if you want to understand what somebody's saying, best thing to do is understand who they're talking to. I mean, if you've got a man standing there saying woof woof, and you think, well, what's this guy saying? Woof woof, what does he mean? I don't understand that. Well, look who he's talking to. He's talking to his dog. So he's obviously messing around with his dog. It's nothing for you to worry about. But if this person's talking to a king, then you've got to understand, oh, that's why he's talking in that way. That's why he's speaking in that way. You got people like in society, like they're hood, they're ghetto. But when they come across someone professional, they don't know how to raise their level of intelligence to be able to at least speak to that person. I recognize when I'm talking to someone ghetto. I recognize when I'm talking to someone professional. So I should be able to adapt in both situations and address people in certain aspects. You look silly going into a professional environment trying to talk hood. As much as you think it sounds cool and that's how your mates talk, you look like an idiot sitting at a professional table having a meeting with someone, trying to act hood. So anyway, so like I was saying, so going back to Acts 26, I knew this is what I needed to look at, and as you can see, this is my first thing is the only thing I needed to go to. So, and I went here, and what they do is they hit the nail on the head, and they look at the aspect of the conversation and what it's about. It says here St. Paul's discourse and dialogue with King Agrippa and Governor Festus as a model for contemporary interreligious understanding and communication. Um, this is the website's called ResearchGate. Okay, so starting here, that kind of gives you an introduction into what it's all about. It says, in a day in which there are different religious systems or system vying for acceptance and probably even dominance, it is high time to identify a peaceful model for interreligious understanding and communication. St. Paul had several interactions with the Jewish leaders, monarchs, and government officials on religious topics and issues in between AD 60 to AD 62 at Caesarea. His interaction with King Agrippa II and Governor Festus can be used as a paradigm for contemporary interreligious understanding and communication. Because even though Paul's life was hanging on a balance as a prisoner about to be transported to Rome, he did not resort to violence, verbal abuse, or rain down curses when his religious claims were questioned. Instead, he argued as a seasoned philosopher, prayed as a pious saint, and appealed as a prisoner in chains with humility. It says, for the veracity and reasonability of his truth claim, the article will interact with a few philosophical themes that surface during the discourse and dialogue, and also attempt to trace St. Paul's use of rhetoric in his discourse. So he said, now this is another thing, that open-ended statement is actually a rhetorical statement, and this is another thing that the Wi-Fi, the Naquam, and the guy representing the religion of Christianity. A lot of them, even Vocab Malone, this is what a lot of people don't understand. They don't understand the rhetoric that he uses, and the fact that, like I said before, he had to go to different groups of people and different customs, different philosophies, and obviously through that, he had to use different rhetoric to get through to them. It says the title of this article is St. Paul's Discourse and Dialogue with King Agrippa and Governor Festus, a model for contemporary interreligious understanding and communication. And so I'm not going to read the whole article, but there's certain bits I'm going to pick out. I'm going to start here. This is 2.6. It says the religious belief of St. Paul, King Agrippa II, and Governor Festus. Like I said, I'm not going to read the whole article. I mean, we know the story pretty much. And if you don't, you can quite easily go back and read Acts chapter 26. You can even go before that and read about what's happened. So it says here, the religious belief of St. Paul and King Agrippa II and Governor Festus. It says the Jews in the first century believed in a personal God who had revealed himself through miraculous interventions in history. So obviously we're talking about Yahweh, in the ancient days of the ancient prophets. It says in oral pronouncements of divinity, authenticated prophets, and inscripted truth. And St. Paul, as a Jew, would have subscribed to this belief too. It says, commenting on St. Paul's religious belief, Sanders observes that he believed in one God. He thought that there were other powers in the universe besides the Most High. He thought that the Most High was exercising a grand plan in history, which is exactly what we tell you now. There are many powers, angelic beings, and that have influence on the world, but ultimately it's all controlled by one power, which is Yahweh, and his son, who is Yahweh Shai, the one they ignorantly called Jesus. It says, and he thought that individuals could decide to be with him or against him. Obviously, that depends on what powers are working on you. So his breakdown of Apostle Paul was, quite clear and straightforward. It says it must be pointed out that St. Paul's religious belief took a drastic change after his religious experience on the road to Damascus. It says even though St. Paul shared the basic tenets of Judaism, he was at odds with the Jewish religious leaders, as the account in Acts and epistles indicate. St. Paul's faced opposition from the Jewish religious leaders because of his proclamation of Yahweh Shai as the promised Messiah. ruling out the necessity for adherence to the Mosaic law and circumcision as a prerequisite for salvation, and inviting the Gentiles as joint heirs with the Jews. Now, they obviously they took it, right to the limit there. They're pretty much saying that, because of the belief in Yahushua, you wouldn't have to obey. Paul ruled out the necessity for adherence to Mosaic law. He didn't actually do that. He said, follow it to the best of your ability. However, coming in as a new believer, you know, they're not going to dump all the laws on top of you straight away and expect you to believe them, follow them, sorry, within a week. So obviously there's a process. And it's part of, again, the understanding of knowing that when you're going to these different groups of people, different backgrounds, and you're taking them out of those backgrounds, it's all good presenting somebody with the truth, but understand what background they come out of to be able to know how to hit them with the truth, to get them out of it. That's part of the job. Um, but obviously, again, they're breaking down Apostle Paul's religious belief. It says King Agrippa II's religious beliefs can be ascertained in this narrative itself. It says Governor Festus and St. Paul affirm King Agrippa's knowledge concerning the Jewish religion, its customs and controversy, Acts 26:3, as well as his belief in the prophets of the Old Testament, Acts 26:27. So, what does Apostle Paul say at the beginning of Acts 26 when he sees Agrippa? He says, "I am glad to see you." And there's a reason for that. Is it because they were best buddies? They're always on the phone every night together? No, it's nothing to do with that. It's because he knew who King Agrippa was, and he, just like any famous person, today, it's easy to go online and look up their beliefs. Obviously they didn't have the internet in those days, but people would have known. Oh, King Agrippa, this is what he knows. This is what this person knows. These famous people become known, and so Apostle Paul knew, about his religious beliefs. He says it can be ascertained in the narrative itself. Governor Festus and St. Paul's affirmed King Agrippa's knowledge concerning the Jewish religion, so he knew that he knew of it. It says its customs and controversy, as well as his belief in the prophets of Old Testament. So he saw somebody, and he said, even though you're an Edomite, you actually understand that these old prophets were real. Don't forget, we say, oh, you can't believe unless you're an Israelite, but these banking elites, they know about an ancient God, Allah Shaja. They know about an ancient power that the Hebrew Israelites used to call on. It's like in the time of Joshua, or even in Esther 8 and 17. You don't want the Hebrew Israelites to come around calling on Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, because stuff's going to go down. Bad stuff's going to happen. Your nation's going to be overturned, and the Most High is going to put the Israelites back on top. So, we say, you can't believe in this. You're not going to be a believer in the truth, in the understanding, unless you're an Israelite, which is true, unless you're predestined also. However, there are people of the other nations that do believe that we have that higher power. Rahab is a good example. So Apostle Paul saw Agrippa and said, okay, this man understands religious systems. He understands that there was a power of old, even though maybe at that time he wasn't making his presence felt directly. Obviously, you had the disciples and the apostles out. Yahushua came and went. Some people believed, some didn't. But that that ancient power of the Most High, making the ground open up, hail fall from the sky and just killing out people, and so on and so forth. So, when you read in Acts and it says that he was pleased, you've got to ask yourself, why was he pleased? See, people overlook that. Oh, Apostle Paul was pleased when he saw Agrippa. Oh, because it's his best buddy. Every weekend they play football together. No, it's nothing to do with that. It's because he knew, King Agrippa had a certain level of understanding. So now I can, because Apostle Paul's talking, ultimately he's talking to get himself out of a hole. It's whether people listen to help you or not. And so when this person walked in, he said, okay, now I can attack the situation in a certain angle. It says, Governor Festus' religious belief is unknown except that he was unfamiliar with the Jewish religion. It says, one can make the case that just like every other educated Roman, he viewed the reports of the supernatural as madness. It says, it is quite obvious that these three historical individuals had divergent religious backgrounds. So you got to understand who's in the room. See, and if the spirit ain't working on you, you won't picture it. Which is what the problem this in WFI have got Wi-Fi or was it WFI or whatever they are. So and just like today, you've got people that are believing in the Most High. You've got people who understand that there's a Most High and understand that there's religions out there, but they don't really know which one to go to. Is any of them real? Which one is real? But then you've got people that don't believe in all this supernatural stuff. It's all madness, and it's the same thing today. It's the same thing that's represented in this particular scenario. It says the interaction between Festus, a political governor, Agrippa, a king with religious knowledge, and St. Paul, a prisoner who had religious knowledge and religious expertise, are worth analysing for interreligious understanding and communication. The dispute in general was concerning religion. The dispute specifically concerned religious claims. Now, remember we used the word earlier about rhetoric. So we're going to start here at 2.7. It says a Governor Festus was able to identify the specific contentious issue at stake between St. Paul and his accusers, because this is ultimately what's going on in the chapter. He points out that it was concerning a dead man named Yahushai. They've put Jesus, obviously that's wrong. It says whom Paul claimed was alive. Acts 25 and 17. It says the following can be inferred from this statement. It says first Governor Festus as a Roman official. So check this out. So this is how when Paul starts to use his brain to go, well, who am I talking to and how do I use my words? Because you look at it, right? And Apostle Paul has called Yahushai a dead man. He believes in this power, but he's just like, yeah, he's just some dead guy. And there's a reason for that. It says the following can be inferred from this statement. It says first Governor Festus as a Roman official recognized that the historicity of the person of Yahushai. It says second, he identifies Yahushai as a man and not as a Messiah or God or power. It says here third, he was fully convinced of the death of Yahushai, courtesy of his identification of Yahushai as a dead man, Acts 25 and 6, and finally he viewed the resurrection of Yahushai as mere truth claim or faith claim by St. Paul. So that's exactly what's happening today. You've got we're claiming the truth, and then there's people out there that tell you, you've got to be careful. There's people with the truth, there's people with false truth, and they tell you that what we're teaching is false truth, faith claim. It's a faith claim, it's a truth claim. It says so. Paul's dealing with that situation there because he's got a guy basically who's doesn't really know much about that faith. So he's someone who would see supernatural things as madness. It says even though Governor Festus was in agreement with the historicity of the life and death of Yahushai, nevertheless he viewed the resurrection of Yahushai as merely St. Paul's truth claim. It is quite normal for people in this natural world to be skeptical of a dead man rising. The likes of David Hume in the past and Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and the late Christopher Hitchens would scoff at this proposition. The philosophers would label such a claim as merely a religious claim, or in the category of anti-realism language. Thus one can conclude that the Romans viewed the person and the death of Christ or Yahushai as a reasonable assertion and the resurrection as a matter of faith. It was these kinds of tensions that sparked the reason and faith debate in the world of philosophy. So that's where we are today. It says the content of the dialogue. St. Paul, as a first century philosopher, uses rhetoric to argue the reasonability of his truth claim An argument does not necessarily mean to quarrel about something, but rather an argument in the philosophical sense is a set of statements which serves as a premises leading to a conclusion. So it's like today, I'll say, oh, if man can go to the moon, I'm pretty sure they can, they can, build a sewage system. Well, it's kind of stuff like that. It's rhetoric, philosophical. What came first, the chicken or the egg? That's a philosophical question that we get asked, people ask today. So, you may not, it's not necessarily an argument, but it's an argument in the philosophical case. And it is a set of statements which serves as a premises leading to a conclusion. There's Aristotle, in the art of rhetoric, emphasizes three ingredients to persuasive communication. They are ethos, referring to the credibility of the speaker; pathos, referring to the appeal of the emotion to the emotion; and logos, referring to the content and the logic of the argument. As one cannot be sure if St. Paul was aware of the writings of Aristotle or any other philosophers. It says Paul and the giants of philosophy, reading the giants. It says, but it appears that he was probably using rhetoric. So people who understand what rhetoric is can easily read that chapter and go, oh, Paul's using rhetoric. Why? Because look at who he's talking to. It says in his discourse, it says an argument can be made that St. Paul, as a philosopher, has used the rhetorical device of ethos, logo, and pathos in his discourse and dialogue with Governor Festus and King Agrippa. But if the Spirit's not working on you, when you read that chapter, it's not going to trigger it in your brain, and then you're not going to look for it. See, it triggered it in my brain. I read it, I understand it, I can see what's going on through the Spirit. I know what I'm looking for. I type in one sentence. I went to Google. I found one article. I found the answer. And it's not very hard if you know what you're looking for. That Nakwam, he doesn't know what he's looking for, so he wouldn't have the answer. Says St. Paul's attempts to establish credibility. Okay, so 3.1, St. Paul appeals to his zealous religiosity to establish his credibility, ethos. St. Paul attempts to establish credibility as a speaker by offering a brief biography on himself. St. Paul says that the Jewish people have known how he has lived his life. Acts 26:4. They had known, it says here, they had known him since he was a child in his own country, referring to Tarsus, as well as those in Jerusalem. It says they could even testify that he conformed to the stricter sect of the Jewish religion, living as a Pharisee. It says here, Craig Keener points out that the appeal to many potential witnesses is not unusual. It occurs even in Plato's version of Socrates' defense. St. Paul then explains the outworking of zealous animosity to the followers of the way, a reference to Christians. St. Paul says that he was convinced to do everything possible to oppose the name of Yahushua of Nazareth. It says he had imprisoned many as cast his vote against them when sentenced to death. He went from synagogue to punish them. He tried to force them to blasphemy. He said he was obsessed with persecuting them and even went to foreign cities to persecute them. So this one activity can be ascribed to Paul the Pharisee, with certainty is the persecution of the Christian movement. It says St. Paul is attempting to convey to his audience, in that view of his religious upbringing, religiosity, zealous animosity, and persecution. He would have been the last one to proclaim that the dead man, Jesus, was alive. In other words, he was arguing for the ethos, credibility as a speaker. So that's why when you hear the phrase, he says dead man, why would Apostle Paul refer to Yahushua as a dead man? This argument's about whether this dead man's going to come back to life. Or why would he not just say, the Christ, Yahushua, the anointed, Hamashiach? He used that phrase for a reason, because he's trying to establish credibility with the speaker, ethos, and he understood that. Sorry, he tried to claim credibility as a speaker by using ethos. By speaking to Festus, he knew that it was all strange to him. You see, I don't know how long ago, about a couple of months ago, I went through these particular chapters. Acts. I think I went from 22 to 28, and I was reading all these particular verses, and I was, breaking certain bits down. And then there was at one point, I don't know if you remember it. I remember it in my head, and I was reading about Apostle Paul, making his case, using the phrase "dead man" and laughing, while I was making the video, and I had to stop myself from laughing, and then I had to explain the reason why I'm laughing is because you got to understand the scenario at the time. These people don't believe, they don't have this logic, and they come across Apostle Paul and these Jews. They're arguing. There's a big uproar. They get a hold of Apostle Paul. They're like, "What's this all about?" Oh, it's about whether this dead man is going to come back to life or not. He's he's speaking like that for a reason, for credibility. He breaks everything down, point blank, clinically, to actually explain it methodically to people who are outside of the belief system. It's like today you go to work and you got these, what I call robot people living in the world. They just follow the same pattern. They do whatever direction the agendas push them into, they do it. These people out here in society, they're like robots. They don't have their own brain. They don't work things out for themselves. And so, you try and explain some of the things we talk about to them, they're not going to get it. You're talking about a dead man coming back to life, UFOs coming out of the sky, shooting lasers on the land, all the countries in the world deciding to shoot their ICBMs, whoever's got them, on America at the same time, all these things. They're looking at you like, what? Especially when you go into like the supernatural world. We can explain, what when people die, what happens to them. They look at you. They think, well, why don't you get upset when this person dies? Because I know where they are. You don't know where they are. That's why you're upset. Somebody died. You don't know where they are. Now you're upset because they're gone. You want to give up. You want to say a prayer for them, but you don't even know where they are. And that's all it is. That's why you're upset. When someone dies, you know where they are. How can I get upset? Because I know where that person is. So we have that understanding. To us, is very black and white. To people who want to believe and who want to listen, they come in, you tell them, they're halfway there already. That's why they've come in. That's why they're ready to take on board what you say. People in the world, these atheist peoples, these, scientific, computerized robot people that just do whatever society pushes them into doing, they don't get it. It's strange to them. So when coming out about Yahushua, this, that, and the other, Hamashiach, what are you talking about? I'm talking about a dead guy coming back to life. So you're literally just trying to break it down. Apostle Paul didn't really want to be breaking it down to these people that are non-believers, but he's put in that situation, and now he has to explain it to them. It's a bit like, you're happy to break down this truth, but you don't want to find yourself in front of HR at work breaking down this truth, because how are they going to get it? Now you believe in it, it's true, but they're not going to get it. They're like office people at work. They call them NPCs. They call them NPCs or whatever. So then it goes on to say here, St. Paul appeals to logic for the resurrection from the dead reasons. It says St. Paul is said to have used classical rhetoric in his argument, just like the philosophers before his time. It says, according to Plato, Socrates used the question-answer method in his philosophical pursuit. And likewise, St. Paul also posits a question to convey his point. He questions, why should anyone consider incredible for the Most High to raise the dead? It says the word, I can't read the Greek there, but I think that's incredible, could be rendered as unbelievable. Why is it unbelievable? So that's when they're saying in the Greek, it actually uses the word unbelievable. Why is it so unbelievable? If you believe that there is a God, then why can't you believe that he could raise someone up from dead? It says, all unreasonable. It says, as the purpose of the article is not only to trace the rhetorical device used by St. Paul in his discourse, but also to interact with some religious philosophical themes. It is worth analysing St. Paul's statement in Acts 26 and 8. There are probably three reasons for St. Paul's rhetorical question. First, as a religious Jew, he was probably aware that the Most High raising dead people in the Old Testament. He was aware of the Most High raising dead people in the Old Testament. Elijah raised the Shunammite woman, woman's son from the dead, 2 Kings 4 and 11:37, just as philosophers used the writings of yesteryears. Philosophers from gaining knowledge in a particular field. St. Paul's religious traditions would have enabled him to gain knowledge of the ability to raise people from the dead in the present. Second, as a Pharisee, the resurrection was at the core of his belief system, Acts 23, 6-8. Third, St. Paul is a theist. It says there is every possibility for him to reason that if a supernatural being, the Most High, exists, then supernatural events are logically possible, Acts 26 and 7. Philosophers have argued for the miraculous by saying for if a transcendent personal God exists, then he could cause events in the universe that could not be produced by causes within the universe. So, you've got to understand that the philosophical viewpoints that existed at the time. Apostle Paul knew them, and that's why he was sent out there to do that particular job of going to the Gentiles, going in amongst all these people with all these different belief systems, and knowing how to approach them, and hit them with. So when he's now he's faced with these, these people, people in positions of power, and one of Festus wasn't really religiously minded. Agrippa was. So that's why when Agrippa came in, he said, "I'm pleased to see you." And then he starts to use, obviously, rhetorical, this process of the ethos, of the process of the, logic, logos, ethos, and pathos. So St. Paul's appeal to his personal religious experience at Damascus, revelation, he goes on to break down his experience. St. Paul's appeal to the scripture. St. Paul in his discourse says that he was on trial because of his hope in what the Most High promised his ancestors. The promise, in a nutshell, is the birth, life, death, and resurrection of the Most High's Messiah. St. Paul asserts that whatever he was preaching is exactly what the prophets and Moses had preached, that the anointed was to suffer, be raised to life, and be proclaimed as light to the Jews and the Gentiles alike. St. Paul, the Israelites living amongst other nations or as other nations, St. Paul is thus appealing to the scriptures to validate his beliefs, just as scholars, including philosophers, would use other scholars and philosophers to validate their hypotheses or theories. St. Paul likewise appeals to the tradition. So what he's doing, you're just reading through it and you're going, oh yeah, he just broke down his story. And then he said to Agrippa, yeah, I wish you were like me. The way he's speaking is for a particular reason. He referred to Yahushua as a dead man. The reason why, because he's talking to somebody who doesn't have, Festus had none of this understanding. So he had to break it down to him logically. This is what is going on. We're of the same belief system, and I'm telling them that man who died is that Messiah. And look at what Moses said, and the ancient prophets, and so on and so forth. So he posed questions, he answered them himself. So he used rhetoric. He used the rhetoric of that day, which isn't far off today, because some of the ideas aren't very different. And people who don't believe in the Most High will understand that if there is a Most High, then he should be able to make something spectacular happen. And for those of you that are waiting for that, don't worry. Jacob's trouble is at the door. So So yeah, I'm just checking out where I've read. Yeah, so he used the other ancient prophets to validate what he was saying. Festus, climatic outburst, learning leading to insanity. That's what somebody would say if they had no understanding or religious background, and that's what Festus was. That's why Apostle Paul was using that rhetoric to him, the basic logic of me believing that this dead man is going to come back to life. It says St. Paul has so far used ethos and logic in his discourse. St. Paul was continuing his discourse. Festus became agitated. This is probably the climax of the entire discourse. Governor Festus interrupted St. Paul and shouts with a loud voice, "You are insane, Paul," and blames St. Paul's great learning, for this insanity. St. Paul may have marshaled his arguments to convince Governor Festus, but for him it was utter insanity. Craig Keener points out that Festus may be referring to St. Paul's Jewish learning and probably also his visionary claims. Festus gives the unusual answer that educated Romans gave to concepts so foreign and barbarian to them as resurrection. C.K. Barrett also gives the rationale for the outburst of Festus. The story of a crucified and risen Messiah is nonsense because a king would not proceed by the way of suffering and death, and because dead men do not rise up. So this is what it is. He's talking to somebody who's, Festus is a robot. You go to work today, you meet this guy, he's got no flavor, don't believe in nothing. He just does this, he does that, he follows the same routine every week. That's Festus in the same kind of spirit. It says, because as a king he would not proceed the way of suffering and death, and because dead men do not rise. The first objection was probably because of the prevailing Jewish belief in the identity and the role of the Messiah, and the second objection has to do with the reasons. As non-religious person, it was quite normal for him to believe that in the natural world dead people do not raise up. Such a claim is utter madness and unreasonable. Paul's response, truth and reasonability. St. Paul, who had so far travelled extensively, addressed various gatherings, established many churches, and written many significant letters. One who had a great number of followers is labelled as being insane. St. Paul has a past of being very violent, and he could have responded in a hostile manner. However, St. Paul retorts respectably by denying this accusation and by asserting that what he was saying was true, referring to the content of what is true, and reasonable, referring to the soundness of mind. Aristotle has defined truth as to say of what is, that it is, and of what it is not, and is not is true. St. Paul asserts that what he has been saying is true and reasonable. His religious upbringing, initial skepticism, and zealous animosity are true. His religious experience, the revelation of Yahushua himself, is true and reasonable. His appeal to the tradition of Old Testament scripture is true and reasonable. His appeal to the possibility of the Most High's ability to raise the dead is reasonable. So St. Paul is not afraid or ashamed to declare the truth and the reasonability of his claim that the dead man, Jesus, is indeed alive, and that the Most High has indeed revealed that, Yahushua, I said Jesus, but I should say Yahushua, to him on the road to Damascus. So what Apostle Paul's doing, he's going through a process, and if your eyes aren't open, when you read through it, you don't understand that he's going through that. He's breaking it down. He's broke it down in his mind. He looked at who he's looking at. He said, this is how I'm going to skin this cat. And there's many different ways to skin a cat. It says St. Paul's appeal to King Agrippa, personal belief, history, and pathos. So this is 3.8. Let me just check again. I wanted to just double check what pathos was. Yeah, so that's what I was looking for. Pathos, referring to the appeal of emotion. Okay, so that's what I thought. I just wanted to double check. We saw Apostle Paul used logos, and they explained how he used ethos, and now he comes face to face with Agrippa. He switches to pathos, referring to the appeal of the emotion. You see, now you understand why he made that statement to him, because he's kind of appealing in an emotional aspect. Whether Agrippa is an Israelite or not, who knows? Only the Most High. So Apostle Paul just plants the seed, Apollos waters, and the Most High gives the increase. So Apostle Paul's talking to Agrippa. He's going, well, you kind of believe it. Maybe you could be an Israelite. It depends if Apollos comes to water you and then the Most High makes you grow. But once he plants the seed, his job is done. And then he left an open-ended statement to create all this whole world of confusion that we live in today with these open-ended statements. Stumbling blocks lead to stumbling blocks. So 3.8, St. Paul's appeal to King Agrippa, personal belief, history, and pathos. It says St. Paul now addresses King Agrippa II specifically. St. Paul is pleased to speak to the king for two reasons, namely because the king was aware of historical facts and because these events did not occur in a corner. It was a rather public event and could not have escaped his attention. Acts 24 and 26. Here, St. Paul, like the other speakers of the first century, appealed to public knowledge, to an event that took place in history. It's like today, when people say, "Oh, Mike Tyson is the best boxer ever," and you say, "Oh, who says so?" "Oh, everybody knows it. Everybody says it. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that." People use that argument against you. Yeah, everybody knows. Everybody knows. Who's everybody? Oh, everybody. Everybody just knows that. So it says here, the life, the deeds, teachings, trial, death, and resurrection of Yahushua did not go unnoticed, as though they had happened in some corner. Acts 26 and 26. Darrell Bock, in his book, notes that just as there are biblical accounts for the evidence for the historicity of Yahushua, there's also non-biblical literary evidence for Yahushua. He lists pieces of evidence from Roman sources, epistles from Syrian source, all these various. I'm not going to go into it. Look, you've got Josephus up there. I mean, I'll leave the link for this article in the description box if you want to go through it. You can. It says who writes on. Yeah, so just going into different. He lists pieces of evidence from Roman sources. Blah blah blah. St. Paul then turned to King Agrippa II and asked him if he believed the prophets. This is a rhetorical question, anticipating or implying a positive response. You hit him with truth, so you hit them straight. But he's coming at Agrippa and Festus. The whole thing is about rhetoric. And he went through the motion of logos and ethos, and now he's using pathos. So he knows, he's particularly going through a sequence of events to present his case. So now he asks them a rhetorical questions. Yeah, you believe in the prophets, don't you? Because this is a rhetorical question, anticipating or implying a positive response. It's like I say to you today, right? I could say to you today, well, you believe in prophets, right? You believe in the scriptures, okay? Yeah, you believe in the Most High. You believe in the second coming. Okay. So you believe prophets are going to come before before the end of time, right? Yeah. So I'm asking you these rhetorical questions. And then I'd say to you, well, who are the true prophets? We are. Oh, how can you prove that? Well, I told you in January 23. World War III is coming before 2026. And look at us today. Where are we today? We're very close to that happening. So is that not what a prophet does? Am I not asking rhetorical questions? But am I not leading you down a road? And am I actually being truthful? Yes, I am. So whether you're a believer or not, whether you're an Israelite or not, whether you're predestined or not, you should be able to understand my rhetorical statements and questions and response. So St. Paul is aware that King Agrippa believes the prophets, Acts 26:27. When King Agrippa II is cornered, he becomes conscious of Paul's intention And just as Governor Festus interrupted St. Paul's discourse with an accusation, King Agrippa also questions, "Are you persuading me to become a Christian in such a short period of time?" St. Paul replies in the most pious manner possible. He says that his prayer is whether it takes a short or long time. His desire is that all those who listen to him may become like him, except for his chains. Acts 26 and 29. St. Paul, as a saint, not only invokes the Most High, ethos, emotion, says, but as a prisoner, because he's talking to Agrippa, who understands this religious system, so he's trying to appeal to his emotion. Says, but as a prisoner, does not want them to suffer like him. St. Paul is probably appealing to pathos and emotions and not forcing his belief on people. However, King Agrippa II, like Pilate, Festus, and Felix, did not proceed further in the pursuit of the truth. King Agrippa II merely concluded that St. Paul's action did not deserve death or imprisonment and noted that if St. Paul had not appealed to Caesar, he would have been set free. So really, he got through to Agrippa and he used emotion to do it. It says that after, he didn't force it upon them, he just spoke his thing. He appealed to pathos emotions and not forcing his belief on people. However, Agrippa, like Pilate, Festus, and Felix, did not proceed further. So there you go. They're not members of the elect. So whether they're Edomite, whether they're not members of the elect. So why are you worried about Apostle Paul offering Agrippa, saying, "Oh, I wish you were like me"? Well, you can't be. It's down to the Most High, it's down to predestination. However, when Apostle Paul, you read about certain various people, like the prisoner, when Apostle Paul was a prisoner and the guard, and he got set free, it says that he spoke to the prisoner, he told his whole family about the Messiah, and then they were believers. But Agrippa doesn't turn around and become a believer. So, even though Apostle Paul says, "Oh, I wish you were like me," as they say, "I wish you were like me." Well, he didn't end up being like him. He just walked away and left it. Now he could have been, he could have not been, he could have whatever. But the point of the matter is, he's using rhetoric. He's talking to somebody who understands the religion. He doesn't have the same religious belief as Apostle Paul. He's clearly not a member of the elect because he didn't partake in the, he didn't. Agrippa didn't have this magical revelation moment and said, "Yep, I'm a Hebrew Israelite now." But Apostle Paul, he was trying to get through to him, and it worked because in the end, Agrippa saw that, listen, this guy really hasn't done much wrong. And the reason why he got that message across to him is because Agrippa understood ancient religions. He understood the ancient prophets. He broke it down logically. He said, "Well, you believe them, don't you?" "Yeah, I do." "Well, yeah, I've read about them and I understand that they existed." "Well, he goes, "Well, I'm repeating what they did, and I'm just doing what Moses told you was going to happen." Moses said a man will come and go. Well, that man came and went, and I'm telling you too of that man, and he came to me. And he broke it down. I was against them. Now I've switched. But these guys don't like it. And that's all it is. That's all I'm doing. I'm just breaking it down. And so from that, Agrippa could not argue against it. He said, "You know what? But what it is, he's got, like, for example, Festus butting in. That ain't helping. He's just trying to break it down." But he used rhetoric. There's a thing called rhetoric. And I believe that nobody in the WFI camp understands it, because if they had, they would have explained it to each other. And it seems also like the religion of Christianity, they don't understand what rhetoric is either. You can ask a rhetorical question, and you can make rhetorical statements. When Paul made the statement about the Most High, it told you he used the word God to invoke emotion from Agrippa. When he spoke to Festus, he called Yahushua a dead man. You'd say, "Oh, well, that's disrespectful. Why do you call him your Messiah?" "No, because I'm speaking to a guy who's a robot. He ain't going to get it." "What do you mean you believe in a dead man?" So I'm breaking it down. I'm just breaking it down logically for him. Conclusion here says, mankind's attachment and commitment to religion are well attested in history. This is among the various philosophers out there. It is religious philosophers that have had the greatest impact on humanity. It says there are several religions, each vying for acceptance and in some cases even dominance, just like we are today, just like it was 2,000 years ago. It says this has resulted in religious conflicts worldwide. And the biggest conflict is going to come in that World War III that's coming very soon, which is ultimately going to start off as a religious war, and it's going to end up with the worship of Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahushai established on this earth, with no competition. It says there is a need for mutual understanding, respect, and peaceful and non-violent manner of inter-religious communication. Now we're out here telling you, your religions, they're all going in the dustbin as soon as Yahushai comes back. There's going to be a new world order, a totalitarian government in the name of Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahushai. However, at the minute, we're doing the job of Paul. We're speaking to the Gentiles. We were all Gentiles before we came in. And so you've got to use rhetoric. You've got to understand. You've got to not get violent. You've got to think like a philosopher. And it says here the need for mutual understandings. We have to understand the religion of Christianity, the religion of Islam, to be able to break it down to you. We can take you right back to the day they created these religions. So how much more understanding on them, do we have? We have it. And that is because we have a mutual understanding, respect, in that we're not going to come violently. We come with the words, we come, pious, and we just break it down and we just give you the information. And it says, and a peaceful and non-violent manner and interreligious communication. St. Paul was proposed as a model for the interreligious communication, because even though St. Paul's life was hanging on the balance as a prisoner about to be transported to Rome, he did not resort to violence, verbal abuse, or rain down curses when questioned by Governor Festus and King Agrippa. Although I bet he pretty much wanted to, because he had that in him in the past before he was converted, and he's used to cursing and cussing out. So sometimes in their moments you want to kind of unleash, but that's the whole thing about having the Spirit. You've got to remember, you've got that Spirit on you. Hold it, keep it, hold it down. Wait for the Spirit to come. It guides you. It tells you what to say. If you go into that philosophical mindset, then you understand how Yahushai was thinking, and then how Yahushai was moving. It says, and the reasonability, because what we're saying is reasonable. We are the prophets. We told you World War III is coming. I told you it's coming before 2026. It's almost here. Is that not reasonable to make a claim that we are the people of Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahushai? It says here, it says of his claim by peaceful dialogue and the use of rhetoric in AD 60 in Caesarea. Nearly finished. I think this is it. It says here he used the art of ethos by arguing for his credibility as a speaker by narrating. Says the biography of his childhood, religious upbringing, initial skepticism and zealous animosity towards the people of the way. It says he then used the art of logic to argue for the veracity and reasonability of the resurrection of Yahushai. He argues that it is quite reasonable for the Most High to raise people from the dead. He then used the argument from tradition by citing the prediction of the scriptures. He narrates that religious experience is encountering the risen Yahushai at Damascus, his religious experience, and history as the source of knowledge. At the end of his discourse, he does not force his beliefs on others, but prays as a saint and appeals as a prisoner with absolute humility by using the art of pathos. So that's what he did. He left an open-ended statement. It created a stumbling block. It made these Edomites go out and put together the blue letter. But he also showed humility in that, my job is to lay seeds. I'm Apostle Paul. That's what I do. I lay seeds. Apollos gives the water. The Most High gives the increase. So I understand that you understand religious beliefs. You understand the ancient prophets, don't you? Yeah, I do. I've studied them. So am I not just repeating what they told you? Am I not just doing the same thing? So he planted a seed. Oh, Miriam, maybe if the Most High is with you, then he'll open your eyes. If he's not, then he won't. That's what Apostle Paul might say today if he was in a situation where his life wasn't under threat. But, obviously in that situation, his life was under threat. And he pretty much said the same thing, but in a slightly more sexy way in terms of appealing to Agrippa. You got to make things sexy for people, for them to want to get involved sometimes, So anyway, either way, he's appealing to his emotion. It says it there, the absolute humility by using the art of pathos. This kind of stuff goes way above the heads of these false prophets, these Christians, vocab Malone. You know, so you go into ethos, pathos, and logos, you've lost them. You've lost them totally. Um, It says here, Mal Herb is right when he comments about this discourse that Paul is presenting himself as a responsible philosopher. St. Paul's discourse with King Agrippa and Governor Festus in the spirit of ethos, logos, and pathos can be used as a paradigm for peaceful interreligious communication. And really, like I say, if you're out here today, preaching this word, we're not supposed to be, we're not violent, we're not aggressive, we're not in your face. We don't bang our sticks on the ground. We don't overspeak people. We don't take a microphone out there so we can just shout over the top and shout you down. We just break down the truth. As the apostle elders say, we just lecture you. That's all we're here to do. So we do it, and if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. But when you're doing that, you're using ethos, logos, and pathos, because sometimes people do come across with good questions. They do want to know. Maybe they are the members of the elect. They'll come with good questions. They'll want to know information so that they can go off and learn more. You have to plant the seed, or you have to give the water and see if the Most High gives the increase. But what you're doing is you're vying, by speaking this word, you're vying for power in a interreligious world. You're vying for dominance with the word. That's why your word has to be correct, and you have to make everything, present everything truthfully and correct. We have to go into the Hebrew and the Greek for that. But what you've also got to remember is, when you're dealing with Gentiles, dealing with groups of people of many different philosophies and religions and backgrounds and upbringings, you have to use what Apostle Paul used, which is ethos, logos, and pathos. And you have to kind of work out who you're talking to and hit them at their level. That's what you got to do. You got to hit them at their level. Don't go into a professional meeting with somebody and start using hood talk. You're going to look stupid. But the same way, when you go into the hood, don't talk to them like, you're a professional architect, and you're this, that, and the other, and you're using all these words, and you might find yourself, it's not going to work. So, ethos, logos, and pathos, something that's gone way over the head of these false prophets, vocab Malone, these Christians, and anybody else that's breaking down the scriptures wrong. Anybody else that's got a problem with Paul, or anything else. Anybody that's got a problem with the way we're breaking down the scriptures, you just don't understand. You don't understand what the intricacies of the scriptures of what these people were doing. When you read about these prophets. So I hope that was edifying. I'm gonna leave it right there. Until next time, all praises to Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai, by Hashem Rokak Wadash. And until next time, Shalom.